A Fortune 500 board gets a board book that's, I don't know, 187 pages long. It lands in their inbox 3 days before the quarterly meeting. You know what's inside: financials, segment performance, the risk register, compliance updates, status on strategic initiatives, ESG numbers, a cybersecurity summary, market analysis. The whole buffet. Every director gets the exact same package. Most people skim. Some don't open it. The diligent ones, they spend 6 hours reading it and still walk into the meeting thinking, what am I supposed to ask? What am I supposed to challenge? Where's the real risk here? Then the meeting happens. Management presents for 3 hours. Directors ask the questions management predicted and prepared for. Everyone stays in the safe zone. The conversation feels smooth, professional, productive. People leave thinking, we did the work. And then 6 months later, the company announces a $400 million write-down on an acquisition the board approved unanimously. The uncomfortable part is this: the warning signs were there. They weren't imaginary. They were just buried. Tucked into an appendix in one board book. Contradicted by a rosy executive narrative somewhere else. Never elevated in a way that forced scrutiny. That board wasn't lazy. They weren't reckless. They were overloaded. Now imagine a different board. Similar scale. Similar complexity. But their board book is 35 pages. It starts with 3 questions the board must answer this quarter. Each question comes with the information needed to answer it, management's recommendation, the biggest unknowns, and the perspectives that disagree. Directors show up prepared. The meeting isn't a presentation marathon. It's a decision session. And when management is wrong, the board actually catches it, because the way information is designed makes governing possible. Same fiduciary duty. Totally different intelligence design. Today we're talking about what directors truly need to see, and why so much board reporting fails at the exact job it's supposed to do. I'm Nakel Nikima, and this is the Intelligence Edge. Joining me is a 4-guest panel, people who've lived on both sides of the boardroom table, advising boards, serving boards, and building the intelligence pipes that connect management to governance. Dr. Lian Zhou is here. She's advised boards across Asia-Pacific on governance in the age of AI and digital transformation, especially when directors are being asked to oversee technology they don't fully understand yet.
Thanks, Nakel. Governance intelligence is getting more important at the same time it's getting harder to do well.
Also with us, Maria Alvarez. Maria's a data governance leader whose work reaches right up into board reporting. She's seen how what looks like a technical data problem becomes a governance failure the moment it hits the boardroom.
Glad to be here. This is where data stops being abstract and starts affecting real fiduciary decisions.
Jonas Richter is with us too. Jonas has helped European boards navigate expanding regulatory oversight, GDPR, AI governance, ESG disclosures, the whole landscape. He's got a clear view of what boards must be able to demonstrate they knew, and when.
Thanks, Nakel. The expectations on directors keep rising, and the information problem is right at the center.
And Kwame Mensah is here. Kwame's designed board reporting systems for high-growth companies across Africa, environments where there's less history, more volatility, and decisions have outsized consequences.
Great to join you. In those contexts, you really feel the cost of noise.
So let's start at the top. Board reporting has been around forever. Companies spend real money producing board materials. And yet, we still see blow-ups where everyone says, how did the board not see this coming? Lian, why does traditional board reporting fail so often?
Because it's built for the wrong objective. Most board reporting is designed like a delivery truck, move information from management to directors. The hidden assumption is, if directors receive enough information, they will govern well. But governance isn't about receiving information. It's about making decisions and exercising oversight. Directors don't need to mirror what executives know. They need the specific intelligence required for their role: strategic oversight, stewardship of enterprise risk, and accountability of management. A lot of board books are basically management operating reports with the word "board" stamped on top. The problem isn't that there's too little information. It's that the information is misaligned and poorly structured for governance work.
That's such a sharp distinction: information transfer versus decision enablement. Maria, connect the dots for us. How does data governance become board governance?
It's very direct. Boards govern based on what they're shown, and what they're shown is data. If that data is incomplete, stale, biased, or just wrong, the board's oversight is compromised before the discussion even starts. I've seen boards make calls based on market data that was a year and a half old. I've seen risk concentrations disappear because of how reporting systems aggregate. And I've seen metrics that looked reassuring because management learned how to optimize the metric instead of the business. People think of data governance as operational hygiene. But at the board level, it's a fiduciary issue. Directors need confidence that what they're looking at deserves trust, and many boards don't even know how to assess that.
Jonas, from the regulatory side, what's changing about what boards are expected to know?
The big shift is that regulators increasingly care about what directors should have known, not only what management told them. There's a duty of inquiry now embedded in many governance expectations. Directors can't just say, "Management assured us." They have to probe, challenge, and seek verification. And that creates a real tension. Boards need enough to satisfy that duty, but not so much that they're paralyzed by volume. Because the universe of potentially relevant information is endless. So the question becomes filtering and framing. What kind of information design makes oversight actually possible? Regulations don't give you that blueprint. They just hold you accountable if you get it wrong.
Kwame, you work in high-growth, high-uncertainty environments. How does that change the way you think about board reporting?
It forces honesty. When uncertainty is high, clarity becomes non-negotiable. In a mature company, you can sometimes rely on momentum and use the board as a monitoring function. But in high-growth settings, boards are making big decisions constantly: capital allocation, pivots, partnerships, regulatory navigation with limited precedent. If you overload the board, they don't just get tired. They make the wrong call. So the discipline becomes, every meeting must produce decisions. The reporting system isn't a diary of everything that happened since last time. It's a tool to decide what happens next.
Okay, before we design better reporting, we need to be crystal clear about the job. What are directors actually there to do? Jonas, give us the framework.
3 pillars. First, strategic oversight. Management sets strategy, but the board approves it, monitors execution, and checks alignment with shareholder interests and organizational values. Second, risk stewardship. Not day-to-day operational risk, that's management. The board oversees enterprise risks. The risks that can threaten the organization's viability, its reputation, or its strategic position. Third, management accountability. The board hires, evaluates, compensates, and when needed replaces the CEO. And it needs visibility not just into results, but the way results are achieved: integrity, culture, leadership, health. What's missing from the list is important. Boards don't run the company. They govern it. If that difference isn't reflected in reporting, you get the wrong materials and the wrong conversations.
Lien, how does that translate into what information directors need to see?
Each pillar implies a different intelligence set. For strategy, directors need clarity on strategic intent and positioning, progress measures tied to the strategy, not random operational KPIs, and they need external signals, market shifts, competitive moves, technological changes that could invalidate assumptions. For risk, they need a view of the enterprise risk landscape, how it's evolving, what's emerging that could become material, and assurance that the risk management system is actually functioning. For management accountability, they need performance against agreed objectives, leading indicators of what's coming next, cultural or ethical signals, and benchmarks, how management performance compares to peers and standards. That's different from the information an executive team uses daily. Management needs granular and real-time operational data. Boards need synthesized, strategic, periodic intelligence.
Maria, when you look at typical board packs, where do they miss the mark most predictably?
There are patterns. First is a mismatch in granularity. Directors get detailed segment P&Ls with layers of line items when what they need is a few critical numbers, the trend, and the explanation that matters. Second is that board packs are often backward-looking. They tell you what happened but not what it means. You learn revenue was 47 million, but you're not told whether the trajectory suggests the strategy is working or failing. Third, alternatives are missing. Management often brings one narrative, one recommendation. Directors don't see the options that were debated internally, the assumptions that were questioned, or the trade-offs that were made. Fourth is optimism bias. When management controls the storytelling, the default tone becomes, things are under control, problems are temporary, the plan is solid. Unfiltered bad news arrives late. And fifth is siloing. Financials over here, risk somewhere else, strategy in another deck. Directors have to do the integration work in their head, during a busy week, under time pressure. That's not how good decisions happen.
Kwame, you've built board reporting systems. How do you design around those failures?
By flipping the starting question. Most organizations ask, what should we give the board? That leads to maximal inclusion, the huge board book. I ask, what decisions must the board make, and what's the minimum information required to make those decisions well? Start with decisions, then reverse engineer the information. So if a growth stage board has 3 big decisions this quarter, say approve raise terms, approve a major partnership, evaluate CEO performance, then the board book is basically 3 decision briefs, plus a risk dashboard, plus a performance scorecard. That's how you get to 30-ish pages. And every page is connected to an actual governance action.
Lien, does that still work when you're talking about a multinational with regulatory complexity and many committees?
You can't always shrink everything to 30 pages, no. But you can still adopt the principle and redesign the structure. The first section should be decisions required at this meeting, not a generic agenda, but decisions. What must be resolved before directors leave? Then a second section, alerts needing board attention. Shifts in risk, emerging issues, signals that matter even if no decision is demanded today. Third, a synthesized performance view, strategy execution and management performance. And then everything else can live in appendices, detailed financials, deep compliance artifacts, committee materials. Accessible, but not competing with the priorities.
So it's not just what's included, it's the information architecture, the way attention is guided. Let's get practical. If someone listening is on a board, or supports a board, what does effective board intelligence actually look like? Kwame, walk us through your architecture.
I use 4 layers. Layer 1 is the decision agenda. Not discussion topics, decisions. Approve Q3 capital allocation is a decision. Review Q3 performance is not. The decision agenda shapes the content and also how directors prepare. Layer 2 is a strategic dashboard. 1 page that answers, is the strategy working? This should include progress against strategic objectives, leading indicators, and competitive or peer benchmarks. It's built for pattern recognition, not deep analysis. Layer 3 is the risk landscape. Not a static risk register that never changes. A dynamic view, top risks, how they've moved, what's emerging, and where the organization is explicitly accepting risk that the board should knowingly endorse. And I like adding velocity, how fast can this risk hit? A slow-moving risk needs a different oversight rhythm than a fast-moving one. Layer 4 is decision briefs. 1 brief per decision, the context, options considered, management's recommendation, key assumptions, uncertainties, any dissenting views, and what success and failure would look like. That brief is where governance really happens, because it lets directors evaluate the reasoning, not just the conclusion.
Maria, none of that works if the numbers are untrustworthy. How do you build trust into the board's information stream without turning directors into auditors?
You can do it with 3 mechanisms that are simple enough to include in board materials. First is source transparency. For key metrics, provide a plain language statement of where it comes from. Revenue reflects closed contracts in the CRM as of March 31st, is very different from management estimates. Second is validation indicators. For critical data, signal the confidence level. Has it been reconciled? Audited? Is there measurement uncertainty? False precision is dangerous. An honest estimate is safer than an overly precise number that's actually shaky. Third is trend consistency. If a metric definition changes, if a methodology shifts, if comparability breaks, flag it. Restate prior periods if needed and clearly say what changed. Boards get misled when numbers quietly morph over time. Directors don't need to personally validate everything, but they do need a clear signal that validation exists, and a warning when confidence should drop.
Jonas, where do compliance and regulatory obligations fit? A lot of organizations treat compliance like a separate binder.
That's the trap, treating compliance as additive. Strategy update, then risk update, then a separate compliance dump. It fragments attention and hides the connections. Instead, compliance should be embedded. If you're discussing strategy, include the regulatory implications of that strategy. In the risk landscape, compliance risks should sit alongside market and operational risks. In decision briefs, include compliance considerations as part of the choice. You can still have a separate compliance appendix for technical things, audit findings, certifications, regulator correspondence, but the board's core intelligence should integrate compliance into governing, not bolt it on. And I'm a big believer in adding a regulatory horizon section. What's coming? What enforcement trends are shifting? What peer incidents reveal about where regulators are focusing? Boards need to see around corners.
Lien, there's also a human problem here. Management has incentives to present the cleanest possible story. How do boards make sure uncomfortable truths actually surface?
You're naming a structural risk. Management curates the board's reality. Most information flows through the CEO, which means the board can end up seeing what leadership is comfortable showing. So you need counterweights. One is independent channels, internal audit reporting to the audit committee, legal counsel having direct access to the board, external advisors providing an outside view. Another is structured dissent. For major decisions, require a section that captures concerns raised during internal deliberations or alternative perspectives. It normalizes disagreement instead of hiding it. Then there are executive sessions, time without management present, so directors can speak candidly. And also direct engagement below the CEO, site visits, skip-level conversations, business unit leader briefings. That's where unfiltered signal comes from. None of this means you distrust management. It means you verify. Trust without verification is not governance.
Kwame, when people hear board intelligence system, they imagine complicated technology. What does the technical side really look like?
It's usually simpler than people think. You need a secure board portal for distribution, historical access, and communication. Directors need it to be easy because they're not trying to become IT experts. You need a dashboard layer that can produce the strategic dashboard from underlying systems, ideally with dynamic updates so the board isn't living off stale snapshots. You need a document workflow, version control, approvals, clear ownership, and calendar integration so deadlines and follow-ups don't get lost. But honestly, the hard part isn't software. It's deciding what belongs in the signal and what belongs in the noise, and then maintaining that discipline over time.
Let's talk about failure modes. Specific ways board intelligence goes wrong, and how to prevent the mess. Jonas, what do you see most often?
The compliance dump. Management interprets inform the board as give them everything. So directors get 40 pages of regulatory updates, certifications, audit points, policy acknowledgements. No one can process it. People skim. And then when a material issue is buried in there, the board misses it, while management later says, "We disclosed it." The fix is exception-based reporting. The board doesn't need proof that routine compliance is happening. They need to see exceptions, concerns, and what's emerging. One page can do it. Material issues, watch items, and the regulatory horizon. Put the details in an appendix for whoever wants to go deep.
Maria, your favorite recurring failure?
The metric treadmill. KPIs accumulate like clutter in a garage. Someone adds a metric. No one ever removes one. Over time, what used to be a focused dashboard becomes a wall of numbers. The board can't tell what matters, so nothing gets the attention it deserves. Even a red flag becomes one red flag among many. The prevention is an annual metric review. For each metric, ask, is it still tied to strategy? And does the board change its actions based on this metric? If not, remove it. A strong dashboard usually tops out around 10 to 15 metrics.
Lien, what's a subtle failure that people underestimate?
The narrative trap. Management gets very good at board storytelling. Challenges become headwinds. Underperformance becomes timing. Pivots become refinements. When everything sounds reasonable, directors lose the ability to distinguish resilience from spin. And then the situation collapses suddenly, even though it was deteriorating for a while. The antidote is structure that limits narrative manipulation. Require actual versus forecast with thresholds that force explicit acknowledgement of misses. Require explanations that retire ambiguity. And for strategy, don't accept only updates. Ask for a hypothesis check. What evidence supports the hypothesis, what evidence contradicts it, and how confident are we now? Structure produces honesty. Unstructured narrative makes room for obfuscation.
Kwame.
The historical anchor. Board packs become history books. Last quarter results, last month incidents, prior period comparisons. Directors become experts in what already happened. But governance is about the future. The past is useful only as a signal. So the fix is pairing every backward-looking section with a forward-looking counterpart. Financial results with outlook. Incident review with emerging risks. Strategy progress with a confidence assessment. A test I like is, if a director read only the forward-looking sections, could they still govern effectively? If not, your reporting is too anchored in history.
Here's the harder question. What if the board itself is the issue? Directors don't engage, they don't read, they don't challenge. Can better materials fix that?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If a board is captured, too loyal to the CEO, too inexperienced, or simply disengaged, information design won't solve a cultural or composition problem. But many boards aren't malicious or negligent. They're under-enabled. Give a willing board decision-focused material, and you often see a step change. People who used to ignore the pack engage when it's concise, prioritized, and tied to real choices. And the chair and lead independent director matter a lot. They set expectations, model preparation, invite hard questions. Culture cascades from there. And I'd add director education. Plenty of directors are brilliant in their domain yet haven't been trained in what good governance intelligence looks like. Not just compliance refreshers, real skill building. How to test assumptions, how to ask for evidence, how to connect strategy to risk to accountability. When directors learn what good looks like, they start demanding it.
Let's look forward. 5 to 10 years from now, what changes in board intelligence do you expect, and what should boards prepare for? Kwame, what does tech unlock?
A few big shifts are already starting. One is real-time dashboards. Boards won't rely only on quarterly snapshots. They'll have continuously updated strategic views, so they can check the pulse when they want. Second is scenario simulation. AI tools will let directors explore what-if questions, what happens to risk profile if we do acquisition A, how does confidence change under different market conditions, more interactive exploration, less static slide deck. Third is comparative intelligence, automated benchmarking against peers, competitors, and best-in-class reference points. And fourth is meeting intelligence, AI-assisted preparation that ties the decision agenda to the right materials, surfaces relevant history, and even suggests lines of inquiry based on what's in the pack and what's changed. Pieces of this exist now. I think it becomes standard for well-governed organizations over the next decade.
Lian, how does AI change the board management relationship?
It's opportunity and a new burden at the same time. The opportunity is synthesis. AI can process large volumes of organizational information and surface signals humans might miss, anomalies in financial patterns, trends in customer behavior, shifts in employee sentiment, things that are easy to overlook when reporting is hand-curated. The burden is that boards must now govern AI itself. Directors will be overseeing AI deployment, ethics, controls, and alignment with values. That's a new governance domain, and many boards aren't ready for it. There's an irony, boards will need AI help to govern, while also needing to govern the AI that helps them. That requires AI literacy at the board level, not deep technical skill, but enough understanding to ask the right questions.
Jonas, how do you see regulatory expectations evolving alongside all this?
3 directions. 1. Broader disclosure. Boards increasingly must disclose what they oversee: climate risk, cyber, AI governance, human capital. That expands what boards must actually be able to discuss credibly. 2. Compliance becomes closer to continuous. The world of annual attestations is fading. Regulators want faster detection and quicker disclosure of material issues. Board intelligence needs to speed up. 3. Director accountability keeps tightening. More personal exposure, which means boards have to be able to show they had access to material information and that they engaged with it seriously, not just passively received it. So complexity goes up, expectations go up, and boards have to become more sophisticated consumers of intelligence just to meet baseline obligations.
Maria, what about data trust when AI-generated content becomes more common, even inside board materials?
The trust problem gets worse before it gets better. As AI generates more content, boards will need not just accuracy checks on data, but integrity checks across the whole pipeline. What's authentic, what's derived, what's estimated, what's generated, and what controls exist. I expect something like a board intelligence audit to emerge, formal evaluation of the quality, completeness, and reliability of the information flowing to directors. We audit financials regularly. But governance depends on more than financials now. Boards that will be effective in 2030 are building information assurance systems today.
Let's close with tactical edge, one concrete move each of you wants listeners to take. Lian, for CEOs or CFOs who prep the board book, what do you want them to do next cycle?
Put one page at the very front titled, "Decisions Required This Meeting." List the actual decisions. Next to each, include the page numbers where the supporting material begins. Then look at the rest of the pack and ask, does it help directors make those decisions? If big sections don't connect to any decision, you've learned something important about what's included out of habit, not necessity.
Maria, for board chairs or lead independent directors.
After the next meeting, privately ask directors 2 or 3 questions. Did you read the full pack? What sections were most valuable, and what did you skip? Use that feedback to redesign the next package. It breaks the illusion that length equals rigor.
Jonas, for directors themselves.
Pick one claim in the materials that you can't verify from what you were given. Then ask management in the meeting, how do we know this is accurate? What's the source and what validation did it go through? If directors make that routine, the organization's standard of evidence rises fast.
Kwame, for management teams rebuilding board reporting.
Do an exercise, build a 30-page version of your current board pack. Compress by 80%. Decide what absolutely must remain. Decide what becomes appendix. Decide what disappears completely. Even if you don't ship that version, the exercise reveals what you truly believe is essential versus what you're including because you're defensive or because it's tradition.
Let me pull the signal out of everything we covered. Board reporting fails when it's built to move information instead of enabling governance decisions. Directors don't need everything management knows. They need the intelligence that supports strategic oversight, enterprise risk stewardship, and management accountability. Effective board intelligence starts with the decision agenda. What must the board decide, and what's the minimum information required to decide well? When you design around that, the pack gets shorter, sharper, and far more useful. The recurring breakdowns, compliance dumps, KPI bloat, narrative spin, and board packs that worship the past, come from designing for completeness instead of effectiveness. And looking forward, we're moving into real-time dashboards, AI-assisted preparation, and tighter regulatory expectations. Boards will have to level up as consumers of intelligence, while also overseeing the AI systems that increasingly generate and synthesize that intelligence. The organizations that govern well won't treat board reporting as admin work. They'll treat it as a design discipline. Lien, Maria, Jonas, Kwame, thank you.
Thanks, Nakel.
Really good conversation.
Appreciated it.
Thanks for having us.
Next week on the Intelligence Edge, cross-functional intelligence, breaking the silo tax. We'll get into the hidden cost of departmental data kingdoms, and what changes when decisions stop bouncing between silos. Until then, I'm Nakel Nikima. Make better decisions.